So we're at the finals of the Lincolnshire Environmental Awards. With me I've got Tom Houghton. Tell us about your project, Tom.
I've got a market garden in Boston. We do a children's course on Tuesdays with Tower Road Academy, and we do an adult course on Thursdays for anyone in the community that wants to get out into the garden, have fun and generally improve their mental health and well-being.
How did it come about?
I bought the plot 3.5 years ago. It was a derelict orchard and growing space. There's an acre of field, really, that I then turned into an area that's got 54 no-dig beds. And over the last 3 years, we've been putting up a polytunnel, restoring the orchard with lots of restorative pruning of the apple trees and getting them into a better shape.
So Nigel Hooper, just explain a bit about your project.
Cherry Fields is about 12 or 13 acres of land which was previously intensively farmed and bought by the parish council to give access to the river. And over the last 7 or 8 years, working with groups from the community and schools and children, we've planted large areas of woodland. We've created a wildflower meadow and dug a lot of ponds and created paths. And now it's a blossoming wildlife reserve that is an asset for all members of the community.
Sue Coleman, tell us about your project.
Hi, I'm the Secretary of the Nettle and Woodland Trust, and I'm going to talk about the Ashing Lane Nature Reserve. It's 36 hectares of mixed woodland and meadows and water, and it's been established since 2009, and it's now a proper woodland with lots and lots of interesting features.
And is it being used by the local community?
Oh, enormously, yes. Particularly during COVID, it became a lot of people's regular place to visit. And on the Sunday after the easing of lockdown, we counted 200 people in 4 hours.
OK, so ladies and gentlemen, we come to the announcement of the Lincolnshire Environmental Award for 2024. And we ask Richard Pennell to announce the winner for us.
I have an envelope here in best tradition on these things. So the winners of the Lincolnshire Environmental Awards 2024 are Cherry Fields.
So Matthew, we're out and about again today. We're at the Wisby Nature Park. Fantastic day today, but we're not here necessarily to look at the wildlife, are we?
Not today, and actually, to be fair, you've been able to come a little bit later than last time as well.
Yeah, last time it was the dawn chorus, and it was a very cold morning. The sun is shining today, but we're here to celebrate community involvement and the environment, aren't we?
Yes, so it's the Lincolnshire Environmental Awards for 2024. This has been going a long time, the Environmental Awards. The Lyndon Rotary Club have always been fantastic at creating and running these over the years, and we've been always part of that. And we've recently just tried to anchor these much more into the community element, and as a wildlife trust we've been running a project called Next Door Nature, where we're trying to empower communities to make a difference to nature around where they live, both for nature as in its own right, but also for their own health and well-being and their connection to nature. And so the two things have come together really nicely. We've had the award ceremony this morning, and then this afternoon we've actually got a community event where all of those communities from across the county that are doing work or wanting to find out how to do something a little bit themselves, they can come here, and we've got little practical demonstrations, we've got bits of information, we've got experts on hand, and we've got the communities of themselves just sharing ideas and, that whole exchange of, what do you do about this? How do you know about that? They can come together, and it's really, really just fantastic to see.
I think that's the real key to today. If you're in the work environment, you'd say best practice, but people are sharing ideas and enthusiasm as well.
Yeah, and it's so nice to see them feeding off each other, isn't it?
Yeah.
And even though, you've had a winner announced and the runners-up, actually people are just not really bothered in terms of, you won, we didn't, or anything like that. It's how do you do this, and how do you get to get kids involved in that? That's the thing, that's the joy that they're sharing. It's really lovely.
What's been fantastic is we had 3 finalists, and we've been in more detail today looking at their projects, haven't we?
Yes, and you could just see the passion from all three. But I think the thing that really, for me, actually, only having seen them today for the first time, Cherryfields, who won, really stood out in the way I think that they designed both people and wildlife into their community space, and how the two of them were dovetailing so well. That really stood out for me.
Yeah, and we've been out to Cherryfields at Cherry Willingham. So, Nigel, what's the background to acquiring Cherryfields? Where does it go back to?
It goes back to about 2013. The parish council was very keen to get access to the river, and they did a survey in the village, and overwhelmingly people supported that idea. There was nowhere else in the parish you could get access to the river at that time, and people wanted more green space, more wild green space rather than just mown grass. And at that time, there was a suggestion that the farmer who owned a couple of fields might want to bequeath them to the village. Unfortunately, he died shortly thereafter, and it was necessary for the parish council to buy the land. But there was a head of steam built up by then, and in 2016, the parish council finally took ownership of about 12 or 13 acres, and we've been working on them ever since.
Absolutely fantastic. We had a worker working a moment ago, one of your volunteers. Yep. Who's that?
That's John. He's tidying up around the car park. We've got a car park here for visitors because people come from quite a far way around to walk or to bring the dog. And we've left everything as natural as we can, but sometimes the weeds get a bit waist high and we need to teach them a lesson.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right beside the fairly busy road here at Cherry Willingham on the outskirts of the village, but it's great to have the car park because people then don't congest the road, do they?
Well, it would have been dangerous, people parking alongside the road. We found that early on. So we built a car park with a capacity of about 12 or 13 cars. It sometimes fills up, but most of the year it's fine for our needs.
And what about the volunteers? Have you got plenty that want to get involved with the project?
There's at the moment about 30 people on the email list, and we get out about 6 or 8 a couple of times a month. It's not particularly onerous work. We are getting to a certain age, so always looking for younger volunteers to come in and replace them. And over the years that has been happening.
Got an absolutely glorious morning. As we were walking around the corner here from where the sort of orchard area is, I thought there was a real deer standing to attention. But what is that?
That's made by one of the ladies in the village. She makes animals out of, believe it or not, scrunched up crisp packets and cement powder, and then paints and varnishes them, and they are waterproof, and they stand up very well to the weather. And most people who see it, the first thought is, crikey, there's a deer. It's very good.
This area here, it's got the community involved, hasn't it, with the tree planting?
All of the trees that have been planted, and there's about 10,000 have been planted by members of the community, particularly families and younger children. And that's had the advantage, of course, as the children get older and get into their teens, they remember planting the trees. They vaguely remember which tree was theirs, and they've got a sense of ownership. And there is relatively very little damage that happens down at Cherryfields. The area we're in at the moment is the community orchard. There's about 98 fruit trees, all sorts of different varieties, heritage varieties and all sorts. They've been planted with sponsorship from members of the community, remembering family members or special events. And they've grown really fast. They're only 2 or 3 years old now, and some of them are already bearing fruit. The soil here, it's a heavy clay, but it's very, very fertile, and they're doing well.
I spotted an apple on the ground.
Yes.
If it's still there when we walk back, I might go and pick that one up.
Yeah,
now, it's interesting here because you've got the orchard area, and then next to it, you've got more planting, but a little bit wilder.
Yes, the ethos of the area is to use native species right throughout and to make it look natural. So what we have is a mix of native trees, native shrubs, and about half of this top field, which is 8 acres, was sown with a wildflower seed mix about 4 years ago. Sown by hand, I would add, which is fairly back-breaking work. But there were dozens and dozens of people brought their families out from the village to sow it, and it was good fun.
And the lovely thing is you've cut pathways then through, haven't you?
Yes, it's to people tend to follow paths. We have a main metalled path that goes through the site, and people tend to stick to that. So we felt that if we cut paths through the wildflower meadow, it encouraged people to step off the path and come in and engage with nature a bit more. We will next week be cutting the whole meadow down and removing the hay, and that just reduces the nutrient in the soil and encourages the wildflowers to grow a bit better. It'll be the third, I think, or fourth year we've cut it. And it is getting better gradually over the years. More and more different varieties of wildflowers are creeping in.
Very much different areas here at Cherry Fields. We'll leave the strimmer in the background and head to another location, I think. We'll just head off down this particular footpath here, I think. Nigel, it's quite interesting how the area changes. We've come along the footpaths, but the actual trees that have been planted are different here as well, aren't they?
Yes, we've come down the hill. At the top it's clay, so there's a lot of oak, lime, there's hazel, all the trees you'd expect to be thriving on clay. And we've come down to the bottom of the field. It's more sandy and peaty. It floods in the winter, so we've got willow, there's poplar, birch, quite a few of those sort of wetland trees. So it's got quite a different feel to it.
How old will these trees be? Because they look really quite established already.
They have done very well. It's a very fertile soil, and but they're only, let's think, some of these will be 5 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, so they've grown very well.
Nice to see the volunteers out and about. I'm going to try and nip in here into the undergrowth, because I think... Is it John?
John, it is John.
Hello,
yes,
John.
yes.
What are you up to?
Well, I'm liberating these mats so we can reuse them.
Right.
The trees are now good enough so that the weeds won't affect them. When the weeds do grow up, as you can see, it's full of weeds.
But actually, you still need to leave the protector on, don't you, as well?
We
What's
do.
that for?
Well, there are roe deer around here, and they like to get at the bark. And
Do you see many of the deer?
We do see them occasionally in here. In the fields beyond, there are quite a few. So, obviously, if you come down first thing in the morning or at night, there'll be plenty around, I'm sure.
What's made you get involved as a volunteer?
Well, I'm retired and looking for something to do. I love the outdoors, seeing the birds. We were just beyond recent, down in the corner here, and there's a robin just hopping around looking at what we're doing. So
it's lovely, isn't it?
It's beautiful, yeah.
You can't beat it.
I've spotted about 80 different sorts of birds down here. Still some to go. I'm still seeing new ones.
You're making a list?
Oh, yes. Yes, I've got a list, yeah.
Isn't that fantastic? And the lovely thing, Nigel, with all of this is the fact that, you know, it's accessible. It's easy to get to, isn't it?
It is. It's right on the edge of the village, so people can walk down from any part of the village very easily. And from the outset, we've wanted people of all abilities to be able to get down here. So all of the paths, apart from those around the hay meadow, are all ability access. So families and any ages, any ability can get in amongst things.
And the area where we are at the moment, you've used for community projects, haven't you?
Yes, we seeded it with a hardware and grass mix, and it's an enclosed area. And every year we have a community picnic here. So we have a band and a choir. The local brewery sends a van down, the ice cream vendor. And yeah, it's a really good day for the whole village. And during the Jubilee celebrations, we had 400 people here.
Wow.
Which is, you know, for a village of 1,800 people, that's a heck of a lot.
It is. Lovely spot as well, with a view across to the cathedral, I think it is, that I can just glimpse through there.
It is, yes. In fact, there's a spot down towards the river where you can see 4 churches from one spot. It's quite a magic place.
Well, one of the key things that the villagers wanted was access to the river. So let's continue our walk and we'll see how far we can go.
Okay.
As we continue our walk around Cherry Fields, it's difficult to imagine that this isn't existing woodland, because this has all been planted relatively recently, hasn't it?
It has. Up until about 6 or 7 years ago, this was cropped for silage, so it was just a bare field. This is one of the first areas that we planted, and the trees have done very, very well. The soil's good, and it's because the canopy is closed over, it's enabled us to plant some wildflowers. We've planted wild ferns, primroses, bluebells, a whole range of British native plants here. You can't really see them at this time of year because they're mostly spring plants, but in the spring it's lovely to see it.
You were saying earlier that, you know, initially it was just silence here, but now when you come onto the site, you've got birds in the background all the time.
Yes, the first time I visited, it really looked fairly depressing. It was just a piece of farmland that had been cropped within an inch of its life, and there was silence all around. Whereas now, you hear birdsong everywhere you go. One of our volunteers is a very keen ornithologist, and he's logged 80 different species over the months.
What's lovely, where the sun's coming through, you've got the berries and everything. We can see the berries just glistening there as well. And I can see odd birds just flitting around as well.
Yes. It's interesting you mentioned the berries. That's rowan berries, and it is a native tree. Sadly, and it's all part of the journey we're going on, a lot of them are now dying. They're infected with fire blight, which is an imported disease.
So what will you do about those?
Unfortunately, it's terminal. We have to remove them. Nothing really to be done about it, but we'll replace them with willow and birch and things like that.
It's all part of the learning process, isn't it?
It is, and it's something we hadn't anticipated, but there we are.
Just round here, I noticed the sign for the Scramble Trail. The youngsters quite like this, not for you and I.
Well, it was a muddy ditch that ran down the side of the site, and it was overgrown with very mature willows. And we were wondering what to do with it. And we noticed one day a small child fighting their way through it, and we thought, right, this is perfect. We'll tidy it up, we'll make it safe, but effectively it's a bit of jungle for small children to crawl their way through. And even in the winter, when it's very wet, they will still go in there and get covered in mud and soaking wet.
Well, something else for the children, and they were being very industrious as we were walking round. I could hear lots of hammering going on, and I've got a couple of volunteers here. Hello, who are you?
I'm Paul.
Hello, and you are?
Barry.
What are you up to at the moment?
Well, we're installing this retreat, I suppose you'd call it, a hideaway thing for children.
And again, it's a bit of recycling, isn't it?
Yeah, it was in our garden for the past 30 years with our children, and but now they're all well grown up, so we've brought it here for children to use here, and adults for that matter. If it's raining, they'll be going in here, I'm sure.
It'll be very cosy in there, won't it? The lovely thing is that your children, when they come back and visit, they'll remember this from their garden then.
Yeah, oh yes, yeah, they'll and the grandchildren will come and see it as well. So,
yeah. Why did you get involved as a volunteer?
Early stages, back in about 2010, I think, was part of a team that did a village plan, and that identified a lot of people saying they needed more green space, and then the parish councillor Anne Wellborn formed a committee and invited me on that with other people, and we went from there. The parish council managed to buy the land. And then we set about planting it and getting volunteers and the community involvement to create what it is now.
And Paul, how did you get involved?
Well, I suppose it was Barry who told me he needed some help.
Is that right?
So I
You're a willing helper.
Press gang. No, willing. It's good to get down here and get a bit of exercise and a bit of camaraderie between the group. So
and it's lovely to see it being used by so many different people, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Especially dog walkers and as Barry said, the people who are interested in wildlife and birds and things. So,
yeah, really interesting. And Nigel, just coming back to you again on this, a couple of ponds that I noticed.
Yes, one of the things that came out in the parish meetings we were holding to discuss Cherry Fields and what we should do with it was that people were very keen to have ponds for pond dipping and wildlife. So we borrowed or hired an excavator for a few days and excavated a large pond. We needed somewhere to put everything that came out of it, so we made a mound and built a little castle on top. But the pond has naturalised very nicely now. We've planted a few wetland plants in it. And we've got a reservoir adjoining a passing ditch that we can use to pump water into it if the water level falls during hot summers.
And the other place we've come past is the Oasis, and that's connected with the YMCA, isn't it?
YMCA runs the Oasis. It's a small part of the site, and they work with young children and give them support and get them into horticulture and this kind of thing. That's been fairly successful over the years.
Absolutely amazing. Look, we're going to continue our walk and hopefully end up down at the River Witham.
Okay.
We've made our way through Cherry Fields, all the way down to the riverbank. And Nigel, what a view you got here of the Witham.
Yeah, it's marvellous, isn't it? It's extraordinary that so many years went by when members of the community just could not get down here. And it's been shown in the way that as soon as we bought the land, people were clamouring for a bridge over the Delf to actually get onto the riverbank, and it's very, very popular.
Well, we're standing on the bridge now, and this has grown up really round here, hasn't it? You could be watching all sorts of wildlife here, no doubt.
Well, what's been interesting, even over the last 5 or 6 years, is the way the reed beds have expanded. And we're lucky enough to have reed warblers now nesting in the reed beds and on our land. And because we've got the reed warblers, they're the main host species for cuckoos. So we now have cuckoos here, which is great, and you can hardly miss them.
What about plans for the future? Have you got ambitious plans to take it even further?
I think we've done the structural planting now, and the form of cherry fields is as it is. And I think what we'd like to do is try and help people understand wildlife a little more and get more involved in looking at what's here. So I think some tree identification boards, wild plant identification boards, but particularly the last stretch down to the river, you'll have noticed it's a long straight stretch, huge amount of sky, but not a lot else to see. We thought we'd capitalise on that asset and maybe save up some money for a cloud identification board. So a focus for people to stop and have a look and look up.
And we often talk about this in Lincolnshire, don't we? The big skies, and we look up to the big skies now.
Yeah, I mean, it's just down here. It's all you can see in every direction. You look across to the cathedral, you look to Fiskerton, Washington, all around. Very great views.
Fascinating project there, cherry fields at Cherry Willingham, and well-deserved winners of the Lincolnshire Environmental Awards.
Absolutely, and we should say congratulations to all 3 finalists and everybody that entered, and the Boston Community Growers, the Nettle and Woodland Trust, both also amazing projects and really were worthy runners-up. And yeah, it's been a really, really inspiring morning to hear their stories and to hear everybody's stories as well.
And there could be people listening into this who are thinking about setting up projects in their local community.
Yeah, so one thing I would say on the back of today is, if you're part of a community and you're thinking about doing a sort of project and you're not sure where to start, or even if you're an individual and thinking, how could I kind of start to bring a community together or find a community that would be, something that I could get involved in, or you may have particular expertise that you could offer us and could help us to grow our networks of community support, then our Next Door Nature project is expanding, and we're wanting to do more, and we want you to come and get involved. So if any of this has inspired you to want to do a little bit more, then please do get in touch with the Trust. Come to the website. You can get in touch with us very easily via that. And we would love to have you on board. We'd love to have people's ideas and actually to bring people into that growing community.
And who knows, your project could be an Environmental Award winner of the future.
Absolutely. So yes, it could all start from listening to this podcast.